We all know this map. 50 states, one nation, indivisible. At least that's what we've been taught. But what if I told you this map is more accurate? That America isn't really 50 states under one flag, but 12 distinct nations hiding in plain sight? Hey everyone. Today we're diving into one of the most fascinating concepts in American cultural geography. Why the United States isn't really one nation at all, but 12 separate cultural regions that function almost like independent countries sharing the same passport. This isn't just academic theory. Understanding these 12 nations explains why Americans seem to be talking past each other politically, why our elections look the way they do, and why you can drive 100 miles in any direction and feel like you've entered a completely different country. The concept I'm exploring today builds on the work of journalist Colin Woodard, who identified 11 distinct cultural regions in his book American Nations. I've expanded his framework to include 12 nations, adding Hawaii as its own unique cultural region and recognizing the Spanish Caribbean as a distinct entity encompassing southern Florida and Puerto Rico. Before we continue, let me address the elephant in the room. I'm not suggesting the United States should break up into separate countries. What I am saying is that to understand American politics, culture, and society, we need to look beyond state lines and party affiliations to see the deeper cultural fault lines that have shaped this country since before it was even a country. These cultural divides aren't new. They've been forming since the earliest European settlements, shaped by who settled where, why they came, and what geographic conditions they encountered. The borders between these nations aren't sharp lines, but gradual transitions. And they certainly don't respect state boundaries, which were often drawn arbitrarily by politicians far away. Let's explore each of these 12 nations, how they formed, and what makes them unique today. Starting in the Northeast is Yankeedom, stretching from New England through upstate New York and around the Great Lakes into parts of Minnesota and Michigan. Founded by Puritans seeking religious freedom, this region values education, community involvement, and government intervention for the common good. The rocky soil and harsh winters made large plantations impossible, instead fostering tight-knit communities built around town halls, churches, and schools. This explains why, even today, this region leads the nation in education spending, civic engagement, and support for social programs. Centered around New York City and parts of northern New Jersey is New Netherlands. Originally a Dutch trading post, this tiny but influential nation evolved into America's most diverse, commercially minded, and globally connected region. The sheltered natural harbor of New York fostered a culture of trade, immigration, and urban density. Today, it remains America's financial and cultural capital, with values centered on multiculturalism, commerce, and pragmatism over ideology. Moving west, we find the Midlands, stretching from central Pennsylvania across Ohio, Indiana, Illinois, and into parts of Iowa and Missouri. Settled primarily by Quakers and German immigrants, the Midlands has always been middle-class, moderate, and pluralistic. The gently rolling, fertile farmland supported family farms rather than plantations, creating a society suspicious of both government authority and corporate power. Today, it remains America's political swing region, neither consistently liberal nor conservative. Along the Chesapeake Bay in eastern Virginia, Maryland, and North Carolina lies Tidewater, a region founded by younger sons of English aristocracy. Its wide navigable rivers and access to the Atlantic made it ideal for plantation agriculture. Once politically dominant in early America, Tidewater has seen its influence decline as urbanization and demographic changes have transformed it. Yet its legacy of hierarchy, tradition, and refined manners remains embedded in the regional culture. Stretching from western Pennsylvania through the Appalachian Mountains and into parts of Texas, Oklahoma, and Arkansas is Greater Appalachia. Settled primarily by Scots-Irish immigrants, this fiercely independent region was shaped by its rugged, isolated geography. The Scots-Irish brought with them a culture of honor, self-reliance, and suspicion of outside authority, whether from coastal elites or plantation aristocrats. Today, this warrior ethic translates into high military enlistment rates and strong support for gun rights. Dominating much of the southeastern United States is the Deep South, founded by plantation owners from Barbados and other Caribbean islands. Unlike Tidewater, which aimed to recreate English aristocracy, the Deep South built a caste society focused on the extraction of agricultural wealth. Its hot, humid climate with long growing seasons made plantation agriculture enormously profitable, entrenching a hierarchical social structure that continues to influence the region's politics, religiosity, and stance on government intervention. In southern Florida and Puerto Rico, we find the Spanish Caribbean, a region I've added to Woodard's original framework. This tropical coastal area is defined by its Spanish colonial roots, Catholic traditions, and strong ties to Latin America and the Caribbean. Miami and San Juan function as cultural and economic gateways between the United States and Latin America, with bilingualism, vibrant art scenes, and distinctive architectural styles setting them apart from neighboring regions. One of the smallest but most culturally distinct nations is New France, centered on southern Louisiana. Founded by French colonists and later shaped by Creole culture, this region stands apart with its unique cuisine, music, language, and Catholic traditions. Despite its small size, New France has had an outsized cultural impact through its contributions to American music, food, and festivals. It maintains a more communal, less individualistic outlook than most American regions. Spanning the U.S.-Mexico borderlands from southern California to southern Texas is El Norte. This bicultural region was settled by Spain centuries before the English arrived on the East Coast, giving it the longest European history of any American region. El Norte's identity transcends the international border, with shared cultural practices, cuisine, and often language uniting communities on both sides. Its desert environment fostered resilience and adaptation, values that persist today. Covering much of the interior West, from the Great Plains to the Rocky Mountains and Great Basin, is the Far West. This vast arid region couldn't be settled without massive external investment in dams, railroads, and infrastructure. The result is a contradictory culture that's simultaneously libertarian in social attitudes, but dependent on federal subsidies and corporate investment. With much of its land owned by the federal government or large corporations, the Far West often feels colonized by distant powers. Running along the Pacific from Northern California through Oregon and Washington into the Alaska Panhandle is the left coast. Initially settled by New England missionaries and later by global immigrants, it blends Yankee utopianism with frontier innovation. Its mild climate, stunning landscapes, and distance from old power centers made it a magnet for dreamers and pioneers. Today, it leads in technological innovation, environmental consciousness, and progressive politics. Finally, there's Hawaii, thousands of miles from the mainland and culturally distinct in countless ways. As a Polynesian kingdom that was later annexed by the United States, Hawaii maintains strong indigenous traditions despite waves of American, Asian, and European influence. Its isolated geography fostered a unique culture centered on community, respect for the land and sea, and multicultural harmony that differs fundamentally from mainland American individualism. Understanding these cultural nations helps explain why American politics often feels so frustratingly contradictory. When politicians try to craft one-size-fits-all policies for 330 million people spread across these 12 distinct cultures, friction is inevitable. It's why Southern Florida votes differently than the Florida Panhandle, why Northern California has little in common politically with Los Angeles, and why cities in Texas can feel more like the left coast than the surrounding Far West or El Norte. These divides aren't just political. They're visible in everything from architecture to food to how people talk. The distinct speech patterns of New Orleans, Boston, and Appalachia aren't just accents. They're linguistic fossils tracing back to the original settlers of each region. The deeper you look, the more you realize that America's endless culture wars aren't a bug in the system. They're the system itself playing out across cultural divides few acknowledge. Now, for a thought experiment, if these cultural nations actually became independent countries, what would they look like? Yankeedom, with 58 million people and strong educational institutions, would emerge as a progressive, internationally oriented republic similar to Canada or Northern Europe. New Netherlands, centered on New York City, would function as a global city-state like Singapore, punching far above its weight in finance, media, and diplomacy. The Midlands, with its moderate politics and agricultural base, might struggle to define itself, but could leverage its central location as a trading hub. Tidewater, once dominant but now diminished, might align with either the Deep South or the Midlands to maintain relevance. Greater Appalachia, fiercely independent but economically challenged, might resist centralization altogether, preferring a loose confederation. The Deep South would likely emerge as a conservative powerhouse with strong emphasis on tradition, religion, and business-friendly policies. The Spanish Caribbean would strengthen its ties to Latin America, potentially becoming a vital bridge between North and South. New France, despite its small size, would preserve its unique cultural heritage while likely aligning economically with neighboring regions. El Norte would capitalize on its bicultural identity and young workforce to become an economic bridge between North and Central America. The Far West, resource-rich but sparsely populated, might struggle with sustainability but could leverage its natural resources for global influence. The left coast would likely emerge as a technological and environmental leader, forming a Pacific alliance with Hawaii and Asian nations. Hawaii could use its strategic location to become a diplomatic and military keystone in the Pacific while preserving its indigenous culture. Here's what fascinates me most about these 12 nations. They reveal a hidden map that explains so much about American society. When you overlay this cultural map with data on everything from voting patterns to COVID response to gun ownership to religiosity, the correlations are striking. It's not that people in Yankeedom are inherently liberal or people in the Deep South are inherently conservative. It's that these cultures emerge from different historical circumstances, geographic realities, and founding values that shape how they view government, individual rights, community responsibility, and social change. This hidden map also explains why Americans can feel like strangers in their own country. A person from rural Appalachia might feel completely out of place in New Netherlands, not just because of surface differences, but because of fundamentally different assumptions about how society should function. Smart businesses have long recognized these cultural divisions. Notice how fast food chains offer different regional items, how retail stores stock different products in different regions, and how political campaigns craft different messages for different areas. For travelers, understanding these cultural nations can enrich your experience. Instead of seeing America as a homogeneous culture with minor regional quirks, you can appreciate each region as a distinct cultural landscape with its own history, values, and worldview. For citizens, this framework offers a way to move beyond the simplistic red state, blue state divide. It helps explain why your cousin in another part of the country sees political issues so differently, not because they're ignorant or brainwashed, but because they're operating from a different cultural foundation. The United States has always struggled to define what it is: a melting pot, a patchwork, a union, an experiment. But one thing is increasingly clear: it has never truly been one single nation. It's a federation of cultures, worldviews, and identities that have coexisted, sometimes uneasily, under the same flag. Understanding America through the lens of these 12 nations doesn't solve our problems, but it makes them less mystifying. The tensions we see today aren't new. They're the latest chapter in a story that began with the first European settlements and continues to unfold. And here's the most important part. Recognizing these differences doesn't mean accepting division as inevitable. In fact, it's the first step toward having more productive conversations across cultural lines. When we understand that we're not just disagreeing about policies but operating from different cultural frameworks entirely, we can begin to build bridges rather than fortresses. What do you think about these 12 nations? Do you recognize your region in these descriptions? Let me know in the comments what aspects of your regional culture stand out to you, and don't forget to like and subscribe for more videos exploring the hidden patterns that shape our world. Until next time, thanks for watching.